Welcome to Series 5, exploring chapters 2 and 3 of Walden by Henry Thoreau. It's Paul Medeiros. I'm coming to you from New Bedford, near my residence. Let's talk about the intellectual life and the intellectual virtues. First, intellectual virtues. As you've read chapters 1 and 2 and 3, you'll find that our author uses the vocabulary that we've learned from the ancient world and the medieval world. For example, our author will frequently use the verb contemplation or contemplating. You will see references to wisdom throughout chapters 1 through 3. And the term virtue is used in Walden. And at points, our author refers to the chief end of life. That's a synonym for the ultimate end of life, that goal or aim which will make a life fulfilled and happy. In short, Henry Thoreau inherits the vocabulary from the medieval and ancient world, and in many ways, our author practices scholasticism. He reads ancient texts from particularly Greece, and translates them into English and incorporates their thought into modern thought. In chapters 3, there are references to the oracle at Delphi and references to Plato. So our author may have read the Apology at the time that he prepared Walden. The intellectual virtues are important to Henry Thoreau. So let's take time to review and learn the three main intellectual virtues. And the ideas come from Aristotle and also from Aquinas. First, a general definition of an intellectual virtue. An intellectual virtue is a good habit empowering me to grasp some area of truth. There are different areas of truth. There are small and ordinary truths which we grasp in the world around us, and there are amazing, extraordinary truths. So we can distinguish the three intellectual virtues in terms of the area of truth that they allow us to grasp, and also the activity, the specific activity which they empower. So first, and top virtue is the one we've met, wisdom, which is our translation of the ancient Greek Sophia. Wisdom, we know, is the virtue empowering contemplating. Having wisdom, I contemplate well. And we know from Aristotle that contemplation is about amazing, extraordinary, and unobservable truths. Insight is the second intellectual virtue. Insight is my translation of the ancient Greek word episteme. Episteme is translated in Aristotle and in Aquinas as science. And that's misleading because for us, science doesn't immediately represent a habit of some kind. Science is like a body of knowledge and a kind of profession. Insight is closer to a human habit. A person with insight knows the truth about things physical or conceptual. Insight is the virtue of experts. A person who's an expert has insight into the thing that they're knowledgeable about. So a horticulturalist is an expert about plants and the growth of plants, and with insight, he or she can evaluate and appraise the well-being of the plants that she cares for. A mechanic is a person who's an expert about machines and the good functioning of machines, and a mechanic with insight is able to diagnose and make repairs on machines. In general, insight is the virtue about scientific truths, about objects in the world, about living things, about humans. So a physician would be another example of a person with insight. There are several activities of insight: observing, evaluating, judging, appraising. In every case, insight is the virtue which empowers me to do those activities well. Finally, sense, which translates the ancient Greek word nous. Sense, according to Aquinas, is a natural virtue. It simply forms in us by our ordinary thinking activity. Sense is sometimes translated as understanding, and understanding, I think, is a misleading term. Sense is much closer to what the term that we do use in ordinary life, like, do you have any sense? refers to this important virtue. What is the activity which sense empowers? Recognizing and identifying things in the world around me. So, for example, when you walk into a restaurant or into a room in which there are all kinds of people present, if you have sense, you gain an understanding of the situation instantly. It doesn't require any inferences or judgments. Just instantly, for example, have the sense that it's safe or that it's not safe. Sense is that virtue by which we sort of immediately grasp the intentions of other persons. We don't judge or evaluate like a scientist does. We just simply instantly know. So this is a virtue which we're constantly using to interpret and immediately grasp truths in the world around us. We've mentioned two additional intellectual virtues, which are sometimes not listed with the intellectual virtues. Sometimes they are. Prudence, we've seen, being the good habit of deliberating, and faith, the good habit of believing. As you read Walden, look out for virtue concepts. We've mentioned wisdom is very common throughout all the first three chapters, and Henry Thoreau has some unique insights about wisdom. He mentions that one of his ways of talking about our life today or in the 19th century is that we're too caught up with our cares. We're too worried about details. We ought to be more liberal and trusting. We ought to know that the things that we need are there, and the people that we need are there. And Henry Thoreau suggests that persons with wisdom know this. There's a marvelous quote on page 63 in chapter 1 about wisdom, a statement which I continue to think about and ask myself, is this a good insight? Is this true about wisdom? I'm not sure, but let's read it out loud. Henry Thoreau writing, "It is by a mathematical point only that we are wise, as the sailor or the fugitive slave keeps the pole star in his eye. But that is sufficient guidance for all our life." This quote, of course, jumps out at me, not only because it's offering an insight into wisdom, but it's also stated there that wisdom is an important guide for human life. That's got to be something we should consider in Philosophy 225. Also, another important intellectual virtue discussed in chapter 2 is sense. There, Henry Thoreau refers to it as wakefulness. This is something that he acquires or develops as he's at the pond. He's simplified his life, and our author tells us he bathes in the cold pond in the morning, and he feels that like the dust has been cleaned from his world, from his perception. His senses are alive, and everything around him is meaningful and important. So his senses have been reawakened at the pond. Finally, our author refers frequently to faith. Faith is discussed and referred to throughout chapters 1 through 3. We'll talk about faith in Series 5.4.